Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our house DJ Tolliver, also now the face of Xbox, apparently, in commercials.
You saw that?
I
Oh
did.
my God.
Well, you posted it, and I saw it.
I didn't
And
know you
everybody's
checked my
going to see it now.
socials.
As long as you continue to do The Middle, you can do whatever you want with them.
We'll
Tolliver,
see, brother.
we're gonna start things off with a pop quiz this hour. If you are ready, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, do you know how many billionaires there are in the world?
192.
Wow. No, 3,028. Their estimated net worth is about
I
$16
was
trillion. Do you know how many new billionaires out of those 3,028 were created in 2024?
Outside of me, 1,000.
247 is the correct answer. This one
could
you're
you
going to
do
get.
this to
Do you
me?
know who? Do you know who the richest one of them is?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, exactly. And as you know, he has taken an unprecedented position of power as a leader of the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. And DOGE has been laying government workers off by the thousands, ending government contracts, getting access to government data systems, all in the name, they say, of cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. The cutting and Musk's role in it has led to growing protests around the country, not to mention people getting rid of their Teslas. So this week, on an earnings call for Tesla, which has seen sales plummet, Musk said he would be scaling back his role in the government.
I'll continue to spend, a day or two per week on government matters for as long as the president would like me to do so, and as long as it is useful. But starting next month, I'll be allocating far more of my time to Tesla. And now that the major work of establishing the Department of Government Efficiency is done.
But even with Musk pulling back, there are still at least a dozen billionaires in the Trump administration. So we want to know this hour how you feel about that, the power of billionaires in our politics. Tolliver, how can people reach us?
You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com. You can also comment on all of our social medias, but especially our live stream on YouTube. Okay, we're watching.
We're watching. Joining us on the panel this hour, USA Today chief political correspondent Phillip Bailey. Hey, Phillip.
Jeremy, what's going on?
Not too much, but we will find out how people feel about billionaires this hour. And Dan Alexander is also with us, senior editor at Forbes and author of the book White House Inc. How Donald Trump Turned the Presidency into a Business. Dan, welcome to you.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
So before we go to the phones with both of you, Phillip, Donald Trump ran for president appealing to the working class. And it seemed at the beginning of the administration like his supporters were just fine with him putting all these billionaires into the administration, and 100 millionaires, by the way, like Scott Bessent, who's not actually a billionaire, the Treasury Secretary. But Elon Musk, Linda McMahon, Howard Lutnick, what about now? Are his supporters okay with the billionaires?
I think it's an issue really of three things here. One, I think that, yes, his supporters absolutely didn't have a problem with Elon Musk. When I talked to Trump supporters with his role in the administration. But I think, number one, it's what those billionaires are doing, right? When you have people who are making $14 million a day on average back in 2023 when the markets rebound, and then you have them talking the way they do about Social Security, with the price of eggs. Remember, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris really talked about the cost of living in America. And I think that's the other issue too. It's not just wealth inequality. It's just too damn expensive to be an American. Rents are high, childcare is high, healthcare, housing, right, to buy a home, access to the American dream. So to have those contrasts in the country while having these very wealthy individuals in the administration, I think does have people scratching their heads. But I think when you talk to hardcore Trump supporters, they're still holding firm. But I think when you see with these recent polls that Donald Trump is beginning to lose some ground and the country is beginning to sour on him, particularly as these conversations about Social Security entitlements come up, but also 401ks taking a hit via his trade war.
And Dan, help us understand why a billionaire would want the kind of scrutiny that comes with a role in the Trump administration. Is this a business decision for them? Have they always wanted to be in government? What?
Well, it depends on who you're talking about. These people are motivated by different things, but for many of them, they've achieved more money than they could ever spend. So what they're really looking for is respect, another sense of accomplishment. They want to be called secretary or ambassador for the rest of their lives. That's a big driver for a lot of these people. Many of them are also just curious about a new challenge. They feel like they've mastered their industry, and many of them feel like they've mastered business generally, whether that's true or not. And they're curious about trying their hand at politics. And then there are the people who just are attracted to the limelight. Donald Trump's one of those. He wants to be in the spotlight. The more chaos, the better. He loves all of the questions, loves all of the headlines, all of the bright lights. That's what he's attracted to. Howard Lutnick is one of those folks as well. So they're all motivated by different things. And it's hard to pinpoint sort of a common thing for the whole group.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. What are you learning about the billionaires that you've been covering who are in the Trump administration?
Well, what's fascinating is that Trump, whether in business or in politics, has always attracted people with similar traits to him. He's attracted people who are impressed by big brands. He's attracted people who are impressed by, people who are on television a lot, people who get a lot of attention. Howard Lutnick is that kind of guy. Here's a guy who became a CEO on Wall Street when he was still in his late 20s and has been doing that for decades. And he's always loved being on television. He spent a ton of time on television right after 9/11, for instance, much to the chagrin of some of his colleagues who were, booking long hours in the office to try to build the firm back and became frustrated with how much time he was spending on TV. Somebody like that sees Donald Trump win an election and says, wait a second, I'm a billionaire. I'm good on TV. Why couldn't I be in office too? And so he's attracted to that and decides that he wants to join the administration.
Phillip, does it appear that the ultra wealthy who are in the government are achieving things that they want, or are they doing the things that Trump wants them to do? Like, is there a difference between a cabinet secretary who's not rich and what they're doing and somebody who is rich in the cabinet? I think you're muted there, Phillip. That's
He's just thinking, gathering his answer. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I think when you look at the friction on the right, the friction in MAGA world, Steve Bannon, one of Donald Trump's, foremost advisors, has really been pounding Elon Musk and saying that, look, there are some people who are more interested in what the president wants to accomplish and what's best for the country. And then there are those who are acting in their own self-interest. And he called out Elon Musk directly, right? He and Elon Musk have had many back and forths over the airways. And you hear these reports about some of the cabinet members feeling a way about Elon's role, so that he just does things as he wants. He's one of the least popular members of the administration, even though he's in a sort of unofficial role. He's not a cabinet member per se, but he certainly acts like one. And I think that there is a conversation on the political right about who are these folks actually working for? Are they working for the president's agenda, the more populist-minded MAGA folks, or are they simply working for themselves and the benefit for their own personal finances? I think that we saw when the president declared, the trade war and initially announced it. When you look at, people call it like sort of the best insider trading ever in the country's history. When you look and see who's benefiting from that, is it average Americans? Maybe it'll be long term is what the president's promising. But in the short term, those stocks and everything changing, that certainly benefits the wealthier members of his administration.
Well, and we don't have any details yet about exactly who was able to make trades, I guess, before the public knew that Trump was pausing the trade war. But certainly there are people who are looking into that. Let's get to the phones again. You can reach us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. And I'm going to go to Mary, who's in Ennis, Texas. Mary, welcome to the middle. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Well, I think that billionaires in the government don't have, in cabinet positions especially, don't have any idea what the average American citizen goes through in their lives. They are so far removed from the struggles of daily lives, especially these days, that they're just out of touch and just are in their own little bubble. And it doesn't truly help any of us.
Well, and Mary, just briefly, give me a sense of what kind of struggles are you going through right now in your life financially?
Well, for instance, my husband and I are building an apartment for my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law so they can live on our property with us. And since the pandemic, which was also under Trump's presidency, prices for building materials have gone through the roof. It's cost us at least 30% more to build this apartment than it did to build for the same materials when we were building our house. And I don't know if that's going to go down anytime soon, especially with the tariffs and all this nonsense going on. And anybody who's trying to DIY it because it saves us money and because we have the ability to do our own construction, it's just exponentially more expensive than it used to be.
Yeah. Mary, thanks for that call. Dan, just briefly, kind of gets to what you were talking about. They live in a different world. It doesn't, a billionaire doesn't notice the difference between gas prices going up or building materials going up like that.
That's right. And, they come from different worlds too. I mean, people get rich in a lot of different ways, and some people inherited their wealth. So it's not even like they, built up a massive business and, had to go through a lot of hard times to get there. Some of these people were just born rich and have always been rich.
Yeah. Well, Tolliver, Bernie Sanders, the senator from Vermont, has been warning about the power of billionaires for a very long time.
Yeah, he's been traveling the country in recent weeks, holding huge rallies. Here he is speaking to a crowd in Los Angeles.
Mr. Musk sent out a tweet, and in essence, he said, Bernie Sanders has been talking about the growth of oligarchy year after year after year. Well, Elon, you're damn right. That's what I've been talking about. The difference is I'm no longer talking about how we're moving to oligarchy. I'm talking about how we are living today in an oligarchic form of society.
Well, there's Bernie. I am once again reminding you that The Middle is available as a podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. Tolliver, what are we listening to here?
This is Fitz and the Tantrums with Money Grabber. So I actually tried to get a picture with these guys in 2014, and they totally blew me off, okay? So this is my olive branch. You guys, I'm playing you on the show. Give me a picture. More of your calls coming up on The Middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, and philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking you how you feel about the power of billionaires in our politics. Tolliver, again, the number, please.
It's 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on social media.
I'm joined by Forbes senior editor Dan Alexander and USA Today chief political correspondent Phillip Bailey. And before we get back to the phones, Phillip, is there a connection between the increasing power of billionaires in our politics and the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, which allowed, in some cases, unlimited spending on elections?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's go back 20 years ago, right, when there was sort of a bipartisan agreement between the late John McCain and Russ Feingold, two senators who introduced campaign finance reform, right? This idea that there should be certain rules and limitations on how much is spent on campaigns. Well, the Supreme Court comes in 2010 with the Citizens United decision and wipes that away, right? And this idea, and one of the opponents of campaign finance reform, my home state senator, retiring Senator Mitch McConnell, the whole idea on the right was money is speech. And that idea, that ideology that a person of wealth can spend as much as they want, and not just spend, Jeremy, as much as they want in a campaign, but these dark money groups that don't have a lot of disclosures, don't have a lot of rules to them, really have given, I think, wealthier people, millionaires and billionaires, an outsized role in our politics. Democrats initially were railing against that. Every Democrat you saw sort of talking about reintroducing a constitutional amendment to overturn that decision. But Democrats themselves have this problem, too, where they have their own billionaires who are spending millions upon billions of dollars in these races. It's really created a wild, wild west situation in the past 15 years in our politics.
George Soros, Bill Gates, and might I add, Taylor Swift as a billionaire on the Democratic side. These days, you wonder who, when you see a music festival, which one of them is a billionaire in addition to being an artist at this point.
They have a billionaire stage now.
Exactly. Dan, how are the billionaires giving politically these days? Are they targeted in their political spending, or do they give across the board just in case either side wins? Do they hit the limit every time? Do they go, how are you seeing that play out?
Well, it really depends on the person. So you have some people who are super savvy and sophisticated about it. You take somebody like Peter Thiel, who really bankrolled J.D. Vance's Senate run in Ohio, and Vance won. Now, he also did the same thing to Blake Masters, who did not, but Vance won, and that sort of propelled him to the vice presidency. Now you have somebody who almost owes his political career to a billionaire. So if you're looking as a return on investment, that's about as good as you can get for an investor. Other people take the approach of, hey, I'm just going to give to everybody because I want them to like me when they're in power. One of the things that you see a lot is after the election, people who might have been sort of on the fence or not in the headlines as a big supporter will come out and donate to the inaugural committee. Now that's as sure of a bet as you can get because you know that the person's won. So if you want to get in their good graces, you can throw in $1 million, $5 million bucks and allow them to throw a great party. And all of a sudden you look like a huge supporter of them. We're sort of in that stage now where everyone is trying to get behind Trump, whether they were at the beginning or not, and say, no, I really am a supporter because they know that that's where the power lies.
Right. Let's go to the phones and Robert, who's in Chicago. Hi, Robert. Welcome to the middle. Go ahead with your thoughts about billionaires in politics.
My thoughts are, it doesn't make a difference to me what their net worth is. I think it's more about relevant experience. For most of these positions, I would probably like someone that's a politician or had experience. For cabinet secretaries, they're going to be looking at, pushing through legislation that the president wants. Well, presidents that signed legislation as opposed to executive orders. But I think bringing that experience to bear, otherwise I don't see a reason that it matters. Maybe in the Treasury Secretary in terms of their past relationships with industry, and I think that definitely, they showed that mattered during 2008 and 2007 when you had them having to host calls, and I do think it mattered in that. But I can't think of any other positions where their status as a billionaire is going to help them make dealing with the federal bureaucracy or dealing with government. You need someone that has dealt with it because government's not a business. It doesn't operate in any of the same ways, and so their status at being able to make money doesn't do much for it.
Yeah, Robert, thank you for that call. Phillip, we think of the Treasury Secretary right now, Scott Bessent, who again is not a billionaire but has hundreds of millions of dollars. And it doesn't seem like he has been getting, for the most part, what he wants from a policy perspective on the trade war. He seems like one of the people who's been pushing back against the tariffs with Trump.
Yeah, and look, I think the caller makes an excellent point here, and I think Dan made this point earlier too, like how these folks make their money. Some inherit their money, some are in positions like, let's take Linda McMahon, for example, right? The wife of Vince McMahon made her money through professional wrestling. How professional wrestling is connected to her being the education secretary, I'm not sure anyone really absolutely knows, but this is the problem, I guess, with our politics right now is that the wealth conveys this expertise. People assume that, oh, if this person's a business leader or they're a millionaire, a billionaire, they must know what they're doing because how can they be a billionaire and a millionaire and not have some level of acumen or some level of expertise? And going back to the Treasury Secretary, you're right. I mean, you would think you would just simply defer to him on this, but Donald Trump has been in love with tariffs, right, since the 1980s, even though history shows that those tariffs have not actually worked out for America in the way that a lot of us, I think, would want our economy to operate. When tariffs are often high, there's often a parallel between that and an economic recession. And I think that goes into what I think the Democrats and others are trying to poke holes in saying that, look, these folks are billionaires. They might have a whole lot of money, but do they know what they're doing? And when you look at your checkbook, do you see anything trickling down your way? I think that's the linchpin I think the Democrats and Trump opponents are looking for. But in the broader discussion for both parties, there needs to be, I think, a larger question of, are these folks even qualified outside of simply being wealthy?
Let's go to Ruben, who's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Ruben, welcome to the middle. Your thoughts on billionaires in politics?
Yeah, so my thought was, I don't know if it was said, it's just essentially what are their motives to be in politics? I know it was kind of hit that they have money, but the question is if they're going to drive policies that help them make more richer or policies that actually help people. What the motive for them to join is. And I've never heard anyone say, I don't want to make more money. So that's the question.
Well, do you think that the people who are in Trump's administration right now, the billionaires in Trump's administration, are just trying to make more money, or do you think that they're trying to help people?
The thing is, there are so many things that people get at that level get information on that they can easily use it to make more money. Whether they're trying to do that or not, it's difficult to ascertain because those things don't ever come out. You probably know 5 years down the lane that someone made money by some policy or some information they got from somewhere. But the people who are right now in the administration, I'm not too sure. You look at each individual. Each individual is different, and the need for wanting to do is different.
Dan, you think about Elon Musk and Trump putting tariffs on foreign cars and foreign car parts. That obviously is very good news for Tesla, which is mostly made in the United States. What do we know about how some of these billionaires are making money themselves because of their role or because of their closeness to the president?
Well, I mean, Elon Musk, he also makes, of course, a lot of cars in China and a lot of cars in Germany and imports parts from all over. I mean, this is a complicated thing for people who have multinational businesses. And he's come out and said, hey, I love what Trump's doing, but this whole tariff thing, I'm not so sure. What's fascinating is that the real question here is what's in these people's heads? Are they doing this because they are trying to help, or are they doing this because they want to make money? And you can't tell what's inside somebody's head. There's no way of getting in there. And so there are all these sorts of systems to prevent the possibility that people are trying to just enrich themselves. But those systems have their own limitations. And I'll give you an example. So Stephen Feinberg, who's the Deputy Secretary of Defense right now, he was heavily invested in the defense industry for years. He's a Wall Street private equity investor, but he had invested a lot of money in defense companies recently. Now, when he took over his position, he had to get rid of those interests. But one of the ways that he was able to get rid of those interests was just to hand them off to his adult children, which, by the way, he was going to do anyway. That's what billionaires do 20 years from now when they're, trying to do estate planning. So it might have forwarded his estate planning a little bit, but it didn't fundamentally change his relationship with those sorts of businesses. Now, on the other hand, this is a guy who has heavily studied defense companies, who knows how finances work and is very sophisticated at such things, who's now helping look over an enormous budget. That might be exactly the sort of guy that you want in office. So handling that tension is a difficult job for ethics officials and also a difficult job for anyone who's rich going into government, to figure out, how do I handle this to make sure that it looks okay and also that I'm not taking a huge bath on public service.
And Feinberg has what, $5 billion? $5
billion, yeah.
Yeah. Tolliver, what's coming in online?
5 billion. Okay, Desmond in Detroit says billionaires are a cancer of our economic system, and like tumorous growths, they co-opt the resources meant for the good of all for their own selfish uses. The Trump administration centering billionaires at the center of power has shown this metastasis to be truly terminal. Unless radical action is taken to excise their influence, our democracy is dead. I'll do one more. Paul says, considering our national debt, it appears to me that our Congress does not know how to manage money. To become a billionaire, a person must have money management skills. My vote, let's give him a chance. President Trump only has around 45 more months in office. It's nothing.
45 months. I hadn't thought of it that way. We've got a Jeremy alert on the phones. We don't get that very often. Another Jeremy calling in from East Haddam, Connecticut. Jeremy, welcome to the middle. What do you think about the role of billionaires in our politics?
Hi, thanks a lot, guys. I don't like it. I'm going to be honest, but here's the thing. Money's a part of our electoral process now. It's dominant. But we have the ability through capitalism to decide whether they're going to be successful or not and to hold them accountable. They've run their own businesses. They've made a lot of money. Look, I'm extremely left on like the political spectrum, but if these guys are going to step in, they're taking their own risks, and we're going to decide like whether they're successful or not, or whether we spend money in their business.
So you think we can hold them accountable through capitalism by either buying their products or not, if they are consumer-facing products that they're selling?
Exactly. We're a capitalist democracy. There's no way around it. That's the reality of what the world is right now and what this country is. And so we've got to lean in, and Musk is a prime example of that. His company is tanking. And you know what?
Yeah.
It's those of us that feel like this country needs to change that are holding him accountable through his pocketbook. And if he decides he wants to keep at it and make America a better place, you know, then he'll do that. But you know what? He won't.
Yeah.
He's going to step away. And this is what we need to do. We absolutely need to do this.
Jeremy, thank you very much for that call. Phillip, I'm sure that you have heard from voters like Jeremy as you've traveled the country, people that have either sold their Tesla stock, or I've seen people putting like Audi logos on their Teslas so that nobody knows it's a Tesla.
Right. I see folks around here driving Teslas with bumper stickers. I bought this before I knew, right?
Right.
But look, to quote the late George Carlin, it's a big club and you ain't in it. It's very hard for billionaires to lose, right? I mean, in 2023, with the market was rebounding, billionaires were making, I think, 852, Dan, maybe check my numbers on the 852 billion to their fortunes in the first half of that year. That's $14 million each day. And I challenge everyone to count to 14 million. You probably won't be able to live that long. Billionaires don't lose often. So when Americans talk about capitalism and the way it works now in our democracy, it's very hard for, I think, the American public to wrap their minds around how much money and wealth these individuals actually have. Again, $14 million a day. Think of that when you have folks who are literally trying to steal or harvest chicken so they can buy and purchase eggs. I mean, the wealth disparity here is insurmountable, I think, in a lot of people's mind to put to scale. So I disagree with the caller in this aspect that there is some sort of democracy that can hold these folks accountable through some sort of boycott or consumerism. I think the real question is for both Democrats and Republicans is, when does the rubber meet the road here on populism? I think you see here, folks are very aspirational. They want to be millionaires and billionaires.
Right.
People want to be successful. But at the same time, the wealth inequality, the expensiveness of America, that's what the contrast is really, I'm hearing from voters. It's not the hatred of millionaires and billionaires. It's, I'm seeing these folks make all this money, and where is that trickling down? Where is that American dream for me as a regular American?
I also thank you, Phillip, for using probably the cleanest George Carlin quote that exists in the world.
I try, man. I try.
Because this is broadcast radio.
Yes.
Let's go to Juliana, who's in Denver, Colorado. Hi, Juliana. Welcome to the middle. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Hello, thank you so much. I mean, there's a lot of thoughts, right? But I'll keep it brief because you've got other callers. If these people were known for their philanthropy, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. There's a reason they're billionaires. They exploited their workers to get to where they are. If you look at who's suing the NLRB to end labor protection, it's a lot of the billionaires sitting around Donald Trump. I don't trust them. I don't think there's any reason to trust them. And to say that they're billionaires because they've done good business or managed their money really well, it kind of escapes the point of how they became billionaires.
Juliana, thank you. Dan, what do you think about that?
Well, you know, people do get rich in a lot of different ways. And certainly there are some that you could make the case that they, you know, just exploit labor. But a lot of these people also have created products that, you know, they didn't even necessarily set out to get rich, but those products became incredibly popular. And what do you know? All of a sudden they have billions of dollars and have to sort of figure out what to do with it. I mean, there are all these different ways to get there. But one of the interesting things, I think, one of the earlier callers said, you know, if they're that rich, they must be good at financial management. You know, you can get rich by being good at a lot of things that are not financial management. You know, you could be, for instance, Donald Trump is maybe the greatest marketer in American history. He is terrible at financial management. I mean, this is a guy who has had multiple bankruptcies of his companies, and business takes a lot of different skills, and you can get really rich being good at some of those skills and not all of them.
Well, you know, I'm glad you brought that up because Tolliver, some of the billionaires who supported Donald Trump are kind of angry at how he's managing the economy right now because of the stock market volatility.
Yeah, here's hedge fund billionaire Ray Dalio speaking on NBC's Meet the Press.
right now we are at a decision-making point and very close to a recession. And I'm worried about something worse than a recession. We have a breaking down of the monetary order because we cannot spend the amounts of money, so we have that problem. And when we talk about the dollar and we talk about tariffs, we have that. We are having profound changes in our domestic order, how ruling is existing, and we're having profound changes in the world order.
Billionaire Bill Ackman, by the way, who was a huge Trump supporter, was also pretty upset by the tariffs, saying on X, the president is losing the confidence of business leaders around the globe. Tolliver, what are we listening to here?
This is a band called Grove with Stinkin' Rich Families. Love that title. If you've ever been to the Grove in Los Angeles, it's pretty much all stinking rich families. So
not all.
Connection.
That's not quite okay.
And me. More of your calls coming up in the middle.
This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, and this hour we're asking you how you feel about the power of billionaires in our politics. You can call us at 844-4-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out to us at listentothemiddle.com. My guests are USA Today chief political correspondent Phillip Bailey and Forbes senior editor Dan Alexander. And before we go back to the phones, Phillip, what about the growing protests that we've been seeing around the country? We heard from Bernie Sanders earlier on. He's been out with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez having these huge rallies around the country, and a lot of the focus is on the threat of an oligarchy. How is the extreme wealth in the administration galvanizing the opposition in politics right now?
Well, I think, Bernie Sanders and AOC in particular, who come from, the more democratic socialist wing of the Democratic Party and have always had an economic critique of capitalism and come from that wing of the party, I think they are having their moment. I mean, you're seeing them in Idaho. You're seeing them in major metropolitan areas as well. The question, I think, for them is that should be simply your base that was always there, or are you actually attracting new voters and new people? And I think Democrats are trying to find, that lightning in the bottle, trying to find that populist mantra, that populist messaging and energy. But the concentration of wealth certainly is something that Bernie Sanders and AOC are talking about, and I think it's beginning to spread in the country as a whole. As you see, I think it's 800 billionaires, Jeremy, who have about as much as about 50%, or have more than 50% of the wealth in the entire nation. The problem for Democrats, though, is that they have billionaires too. I mean, it was at the DNC convention I was there when Bernie Sanders spoke, and then a few moments later, Illinois Governor J.D. Pritzker got on the stage and mentioned, and sort of laughingly mentioned, well, I'm a billionaire too. Right. And I think if we look 100 years ago, when the DuPonts and the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and those major industrials were pretty much running our country, it took a wealthy individual like an FDR to get into the presidency and have a more progressive tax system that sort of swung the pendulum back from really World War II to 1976. Will that be the person who catches the lightning in the bottle for the Democrats? I'm not sure, but that certainly is something I think that they're going to lean into going into 2026 and 2028.
Let's go to Rodney, who's in Lake Bronson, Minnesota. Hi, Rodney. Go ahead.
Hi there. I'm really not too concerned. I don't think anybody should be concerned about billionaires and millionaires in charge of the country. I'd be more concerned about the ones that are leaving or becoming the millionaires or the billionaires while in office. I think that's more of a worry that everybody should have than coming in as one.
You're worried about people who get rich off the office rather than people who already are rich and then come in and work in the government.
Exactly. I mean, because you look at an annual salary of a lot of these people, anywhere from $50,000 up to $175,000 on average, a year. Yeah, I mean, they have to have some living expense, though. I'm sure that the government puts the bill for a lot of their stuff. A lot of them are given a place to live, but I'm sure they have all the free dining that they can handle and transportation. So they wouldn't worry about it anyway, but I don't see how a person could be drawing a salary of anywhere from like $50,000 to $175,000 a year, be in office for 6 years, then all of a sudden they're a millionaire or a multi-millionaire when they leave office. It kind of makes you wonder about that more than coming in as one.
Yeah, Rodney, thank you. It's a good point. A lot of times they write a book or they start giving speeches, but there are also other ways that they make a lot of money. Dan, your book is called White House Inc. How Donald Trump Turned the Presidency into a Business. So I'll let you take that one. People who come in and then get rich while they're there. And by the way, including Donald Trump, whose wealth has gone up quite a bit since he became the president of the United States the first time around.
That's right. There's nobody in American history who has made more money on politics than Donald Trump. That's mostly based around the creation of a social media business, which is now trading in the public markets at a wild valuation. He hangs on to a big chunk of their shares, and that's created billions of dollars for him. But it also goes to things like, selling sneakers and guitars and meme coins and all sorts of stuff based on his popularity. He recognizes that being a politician and being a celebrity aren't all that different. And if celebrities are able to sell all this merchandise and stuff based on their fame, why shouldn't he also? And so he's really kind of revolutionized the game on how to make money from politics. I think there are a lot of people who sort of stir the pot on this issue. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people who've become very wealthy in politics, but who stir the pot about there must be something nefarious in all of these situations. Bernie Sanders is a millionaire, and he became a millionaire because he wrote a few books and they sold really well. And so he made a few $1,000,000. Other people, Mitch McConnell is worth more than $20 million. That's because his wife comes from a very wealthy shipping fortune and they inherited a chunk of that. Much of these massive gains in wealth that you see while somebody is in office are actually explicable. You can look at moments when they inherited a big chunk of assets, when they sold a book, when there was something that got them really rich. And usually the people who are sort of Congress people who might go from zero to $2 or $3 or $4 million, usually that's because of books or selling some sort of merchandise or something like that, which is not necessarily as corrupt as people make it out to be, although there are certainly exceptions.
Right. And obviously we talked about sort of the idea of insider trading just recently. It's going to be interesting to see if any lawmakers had some information ahead of time and did that. Julia is in southern Missouri. Hi, Julia. Go ahead.
Hi there. Yeah, so I teach special education in one of the poorest counties and definitely the poorest district in the poorest county in the Ozarks. I have a lot of IEP meetings this time of year, a lot of new kids coming into the district, and a lot of parents are asking, how are all these changes going to affect my kids? I don't have an answer because our Department of Education no longer exists. In addition to that, the vast majority, over 90% of the families in our district live below the poverty limit. They rely on government assistance to feed their children inside the schools because we are fully funded through a program, or we were, that no longer exists to feed the kids in our schools. For a lot of the kids, those were the only 2 meals a day that they got.
Mm-hmm.
If they got a meal
and the head of the Department of Education, as we've said, is a billionaire, Linda McMahon.
I doubt she's been hungry.
Yeah. Julia, I really appreciate you calling in, and good luck with everything that's going on there. I'm sure there are a lot of people around the country dealing with very similar situations, although you, as you say, are in one of the poorest counties. Appreciate the call. Phillip, what do you think about that? I mean, this is a real life example of somebody who is dealing with the cuts that are being made by this administration, affecting extremely poor people in this country, and being made by a billionaire who is shutting down the Department of Education.
Right. And I completely empathize with her. I mean, as a Kentuckian, right, we have some of the poorest counties in the entire country here in the Bluegrass State, particularly in Eastern Kentucky. And you see, when the proposal to, for example, cut SNAP benefits, food stamps, who has some of the highest percentage, who has the highest percentage in their congressional district of food stamps in the entire state. It's not here in a place like Louisville, where it's represented by a Democrat. It's out in Hal Rogers' district, right? A district that went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump, What I'm looking for, Jeremy, is when the Trump tax cuts come back up, what will the debate be around that? I'm also interested to see, again, how Democrats, are they going to really lean into and tap into this across the board? We don't really have a working class political party in this country. When the previous caller talked about insider trading, I talk to voters all the time. When that stuff comes up, they've mentioned Nancy Pelosi, they mentioned Democrats. Democrats have their own house they have to get in order to hear. This is not really a partisan issue, right? And I think what's happened in this particular administration, where you're seeing sort of going back to a pre-FDR federal government where basic fundamental things are now being stripped away and taken away. I'm interested to see, particularly heading into the midterms, will those more populist-minded Trump supporters, right? Those steel workers, those people who worked on farms in North Carolina, the people who live in Missouri or Missouri, depending on what part of the state you're from, how to pronounce it. I'm interested to see how they're going to respond when these basic amenities that many poor white rural voters who voted for Donald Trump rely upon, are they going to turn on him politically if they don't see something here? Again, as I said earlier, I don't think Americans disdain people who are wealthy and who are successful. I do think, though, that they disdain people who are wealthy and successful when they are seeing basic parts of the public good being eradicated and pulled back.
You can see that I came from Illinois. That's why I called it Missouri, and always have.
There you
Let's
go.
go to Jade, who's in San Antonio, Texas. Hi, Jade. Your thoughts?
Hi there. Well, I've listened to a lot of stuff that I do agree with, especially the gentleman just now, what he was talking about how people are going to respond. But, you know, it made me think about if you were to head a household. If you were to head a household, it would be wrong for you to focus on your own self while you're, leading your household. So I don't really care about whether or not you got billions of dollars and you made it legitimately. I mean, you're entitled to it. But what do you do while you're in service to the government? You're not there because of your money or for your self-serving interests. It is a time to put away. Government is for the people. So that's what you should be doing during that period. And your billions shouldn't have an impact or an influence on how you operate. You're governing for the people. And if I can give you one more analogy, a police officer, if a police officer gets into that industry, to that career set, we know that a lot of power comes with being a police officer, but that's not the reason you're supposed to get into it. You get into it because you're serving the people, protecting the people. That is what government's about. So keep your billions, but do what you're supposed to do. Thank you.
Yeah. Jade, thank you very much. Dan, what do you think about that? And of the billionaires that you can think of in the Trump administration, are there ones who are legitimately doing it for the people and not because they want to be called a secretary or because they want to make more money, in their own businesses?
Well, I do think that there are questions about, I mentioned Steven Feinberg earlier, questions about his family's finances. But, look, here's a guy who's worth $5 billion who decided to join the government to become Pete Hegseth's number two. Okay, it's not exactly a glamour role that he's taken, and he could do a lot of things with his time and with his experience and with his intelligence. I do think that he's somebody who, if I were to guess what's inside his head, which is always a guess, you never know, I would guess that he's doing it for the right reasons. One of the things that is set up are these ethics rules to prevent exactly, what the caller was talking about, people doing things for their own businesses. And that applies across the board to people in the executive branch, but it does not apply to the president or the vice president. And so Donald Trump is an exception here in that he has hung on to his businesses and is taking actions, for example, deregulating crypto, that do directly affect his own companies and lead to a lot of questions about what his motivations are.
Let's get to another call here. And Cordell, who's in Salt Lake City, Utah. Hi, Cordell. What do you think about billionaires in politics?
Well, I have a really difficult problem understanding why the billionaires are able to just let go of their responsibilities and just make more and more money off of everything. I worked as in the Utah Arts Council, as a member of the Utah Arts Council's board of directors, and I had to give up my entire career in order to support the programs that were going on. So I had to let go of any opportunities that would benefit me as an artist. And I had to sign off on them and just say it was okay that all this money went to somebody else. And then not only that, but even after like 4 years of being on the Arts Council, even after that, I didn't get any other commissions. And I don't understand why it is that, for instance, Elon Musk and Donald Trump can make all kinds of millions of dollars and position themselves to make even more and more money against the American public's will, and then all of a sudden cut all of their benefits and just make it where it's like another dictatorship.
Yeah, Cordell, I think we've got it there. Thank you very much for that call. Phillip Bailey, what about like the conflicts of interest? And we've talked a little bit about it this hour, but is anybody policing that? Is anybody really with teeth coming in and saying you can't do this because you've got a clear conflict of interest over here?
Well, part of in the first 100 days of Donald Trump's blitz, really, of Washington and using his executive authority is probably more so than we've ever seen a president really governing by signature, right? Very few bills have been passed by this Republican-controlled Congress. I think what we're seeing here, and we saw Donald Trump sort of go after a lot of these regulatory agencies, go after a lot of these ethics folks in government, and basically just fire them, right? Politically speaking, Republicans have no appetite to hold him accountable, to use their powers in that way. It's really coming more from the judicial branch than anything else. So look, this is what the American people voted for. And I think the experiment that we're seeing here as Democrats and people on the left are feverishly worrying about a constitutional crisis and the abuse of power, I think for Trump's supporters and folks who are still trying to give him a chance, but I think we're seeing that wane a bit here now in these first 100 days. His numbers are really beginning to sour, particularly on the economy. But we're not seeing any oversight. We're not seeing anyone sort of step in here and say, no, Mr. President, you can not, at least not publicly. The only time you really see it is when the markets go bad or when there are these private conversations, often from billionaires who are probably tapping the president on the shoulder and saying, look at my portfolio, Mr. President. So we already seen him, for example, thaw today on, hey, I'm going to lower the tariffs on China. Let me rethink this here. One thing about the Trump presidency and MAGA overall is never admit defeat, never admit weakness. Right. So I don't think you're going to see that.
But I think people are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt if the economy is going well, and certainly if prices start to come down, maybe, but perhaps not if those don't happen. Before we go, Dan, let me just ask you about one more thing. The billionaire ex-wife of Bill Gates, Melinda French Gates, said recently on CNN, if you have $1 billion, that's an absurd amount of wealth. You have a moral responsibility to give away at least half of it. There are others who believe that any wealth after $1 billion should basically be taxed at 100%, that that's enough money for one person to have. Do any billionaires you talk to share those views?
Well, certainly there are a lot of billionaires who have committed to giving away more than half of their wealth while they are still living. But what's interesting is that because their wealth compounds, as these numbers get really big, if you have $100 billion, in an average year, you're going to increase your net worth by $10 billion. It gets hard to give away that much. And so, yeah, they like the idea of it, but actually doing it in practice is hard.
They could give it to the middle. That would be very easy. And, you can listen to themiddle.com. I want to thank my guests, Forbes senior editor Dan Alexander and USA Today chief political correspondent Phillip Bailey. Thanks so much to both of you.
Thank you.
Guys.
And don't forget, The Middle is available as a podcast in partnership with iHeart Podcasts on the iHeart app or wherever you listen to podcasts. We've got an episode of our podcast extra, One Thing Trump Did, coming out in the next couple of days. We're going to be talking about the U.S. relationship with China. And next year, we'll be right back here with journalist Derek Thompson on his book Abundance, which he co-wrote with Ezra Klein, about how a country as rich as the U.S. is far behind on things like housing and infrastructure.
Yes, next week. As always, you can call in at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also reach out to listentothemiddle.com, where you can also sign up for our free weekly newsletter and buy Middle merch with my face on it.
Does it have your face on it? The Middle is
now.
brought to you by Long Nook Media. Thanks to Steve Mork, our technical director this week. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'll talk to you next week.